answer. The question is why, despite that loss of trust, the legacy media continue to gain share in the advertising market. And the answer is simple. There is, in fact, an informal pressure system created by Democratic legislators, this White House, legacy media, advertisers, and pseudo-objective brand safety organizations. That system guarantees that advertising dollars flow only to left-wing media brands. Let me explain how this works. When a conservative competitor to the legacy media arises, members of that legacy media and their political allies rush to paint such competitors as dangerous. The commentator Kara Swisher of the New York Times, for example, told the head of YouTube that my videos at Daily Wire were a, quote, gateway drug that would lead children, including her own teenage son, to watch neo-Nazi content. Never mind the yarmulke. Elected Democrats pick up that same messaging. In 2017, Senator Dianne Feinstein told lawyers at Facebook, Google, and Twitter, quote, you created these platforms and now they're being misused, and you have to be the ones to do something about it, or we will. Social media companies react to incentive structures, including threats. They've responded by adopting the standards of third-party left-wing informational safety groups like the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM. GARM purportedly sets brand safety standards, objective standards by which advertisers and platforms can supposedly determine just what sort.
The halls of Congress echoed with a battle cry on January 31, 2025. It was a showdown over free speech and the future of American media. Reverend Jim Jordan from Ohio took aim at what he called a coordinated effort to silence conservative voices. The targets in his sights? The World Federation of Advertisers and their initiative, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. Jordan accused these powerful entities of violating antitrust laws. He argued they were engaging in anti-competitive practices. Their alleged crime? Colluding to limit advertising on platforms and news outlets deemed unfavorable. This, Jordan argued, was a blatant attempt to manipulate the flow of information and control the public narrative. The hearing featured a clash of ideologies. Democrats on the Judiciary Committee dismissed the allegations as a sham investigation. They argued that antitrust laws were not designed to micromanage corporate decisions. However, Jordan and his allies remained steadfast. They pointed to a disturbing pattern of behavior that threatened the very foundations of a free and open press. The stakes were high. At the heart of the matter lay a fundamental question. Would the advertising industry be allowed to dictate which voices were heard and which were silenced? The answer, Jordan argued, had to be a resounding no. The future of American democracy depended on it. Ben Shapiro, editor emeritus of the Daily Wire, delivered a chilling testimony before the committee. He painted a picture of a coordinated effort to defund and silence conservative media outlets. Shapiro argued that GARM, with its vast influence over global ad spending, was acting as a gatekeeper of information. He pointed to GARM's brand safety floor and suitability framework as evidence of their biased agenda. This framework, Shapiro argued, was deliberately vague.
Lines of privatization and lowering and increasing the retirement age because you, as well as every other congressperson, knows Social Security is going to go bankrupt, and yet everyone seems to have an interest in lying about it for the next decade and a half until we have to take austerity measures or radically increase inflation or taxes.
And bans against books about slavery. Do you support that part about?
Why would I possibly be in favor of bans about books about slavery? That would be absolutely ridiculous. What I am in favor of is the idea that school libraries should be able to make decisions along the lines of what exactly is appropriate for, say, a seventh grader and whether they ought to be treated to cartoons in genderqueer. That's not quite the same thing.
And just because we found some receipts, you did say, I think homosexual activity is a sin.
Yes, I'm a religious Jew, that's true.
There's a genetic component.
You found me out.
Orientation. But the view of all religious people I know has always been that sexual behavior is something that is up to you. And you said, I may have a desire to sleep with many women, but I do not.
I agree with me. Yes, that's true.
Congratulations on your, I'm sure it's very hard to restrain yourself. Mr. Chairman, I just want to shift to Alvin Bragg. He was supposed to be here this week, and he's not coming. And Hunter Biden was supposed to testify. Now he's not testifying. We were supposed to have votes on articles of impeachment, and we didn't. And again, we're just wondering, you guys write great press releases, but the payoff seems to never come. And so I guess we will keep waiting, and we'll do hearings like this. And finally, Chairman, you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater, and that's a restriction on speech, as you have recognized before. But you can yell theater in a crowded fire, and you all can continue to do that all you want, and we'll just waste the American people's time.
The gentleman's time has expired, and I remind him of the first rule of holes. When you're in one, stop digging. Chair recognizes Ms. Lee for 5 minutes.
Mr. Shapiro, we have heard a lot today from our colleagues across the aisle and your fellow witnesses about the need for brands to avoid placement against or association with controversial content. And the examples that we've heard cited are truly despicable. Child sex abuse materials, terror threats, foreign propaganda, promotion and funding of criminal activity. So just to be clear, you have had personal experience being targeted by these collusive activities and these limitations of advertising. So let's clarify the Daily Wire and its associated content. Do you include any child sex abuse materials on your website?
No, we certainly do not.
Do you promote terrorist activities or ISIS videos?
No, we certainly do not, unlike some members of the Democratic Party who seem to be...
Do you promote or fundraise for criminal conduct?
We do not.
Do you share foreign propaganda?
We do not.
In fact, Mr. Shapiro, is it not true that the Daily Wire website, associated content, and social media involve none of those things and are instead a reflection of mainstream conservative ideas and thought?
That is correct.
I'd also like to discuss the concept of advertiser engagement and return on investment. Do you have any knowledge or information about the level of audience engagement with advertisers who do choose to advertise on your platforms?
Thank God we have extraordinary levels of advertiser engagement with our audiences, which is why we continue to maintain a significant ad presence despite the obstacles we've discussed today.
And if an advertiser were making a market-based decision, do you have a decision based on actual economic input and engagement with the content consumers? Do you have any information or opinion about whether that return on investment is a good one if they engage with the Daily Wire?
I'm obviously biased in this matter, but I obviously think it would be an excellent investment, and we have heard from certain advertisers that what they actually would like is some sort of cover and less public pressure on them so they can make market-based decisions.
Now, in your experience, you have actually had your own content limited or removed or censored, have you not?
We have.
Would you share with us some of the examples of content that you have had limited or censored?
Well, let's see. I had about 4,000 of them. Seriously, about 4,000 content enforcements across our various YouTube channels. We've actually had to engage in self-enforcement because the corresponding information that we're getting from social media is so poor. And so one of the things that we've had to do in the past is sort of prospectively remove material in the hopes that we will not be demonetized if we do so. Some of those matters have been, for example, describing the geography of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Israel and Egypt in the Gaza Strip. That could get us demonetized. Any mention whatsoever of a man not being a woman, that will get you demonetized on YouTube, for example. And as I've mentioned, when you're demonetized, it's not merely that you're demonetized, that YouTube then has an interest in preventing the dissemination of your message. So the number of people who will actually see your particular video will be lower than if you are a monetized video. And we have example after example of this. I mentioned in my testimony that Matt Walsh, fellow host over at the Daily Wire, he was fully demonetized on YouTube for pointing out that men are not women, for example.
So is it correct to say, then, that the collusive activity by advertisers to choose to limit or choose to restrict utilizing your platforms, it has both a monetary impact and a potential impact on your ability to reach new subscribers and viewers?
That is certainly true.
Now, you touched earlier on the fact that you've obviously been able to transcend these types of barriers in your own business operation, but you touched earlier on the type of detrimental effect that this has on a new or startup company. Could you explain to us exactly how this type of conduct...
...to GARM's brand safety floor and suitability framework as evidence of their biased agenda. This framework, Shapiro argued, was deliberately vague and subjective. It was being selectively enforced to punish conservative outlets while giving left-leaning media a free pass. Shapiro's testimony struck a nerve. He exposed a disturbing reality, that the very institutions tasked with upholding free speech were actively working to undermine it. His words served as a wake-up call, not just to lawmakers, but to the American people. The implications of GARM's alleged actions were far-reaching. Shapiro argued that they were contributing to a dangerous polarization of the media landscape. By starving conservative outlets of advertising revenue, GARM was effectively silencing dissenting voices and stifling debate on critical issues. The fight against alleged advertising censorship gained a powerful ally in Elon Musk. The tech titan, known for his outspoken defense of free speech, announced his intention to sue those involved in the alleged advertising boycott. Musk called out what he perceived as an advertising boycott racket designed to silence dissenting voices. Musk's entry into the fray signaled a turning point in the battle against big tech censorship. His willingness to take on powerful entities like GARM sent a clear message. The era of unchecked corporate power over speech was coming to an end. Musk's legal challenge threatened to expose the
messages that are being disseminated in those videos see less audience. And this has become sort of a common practice. I mentioned earlier, we've had probably 4,000 content enforcements across our various YouTube channels based on some of the most innocuous statements that I've ever made or that some of our other hosts have ever made. That demonetization is not just a matter of removing, prospective advertising dollar from the pockets of particular outlets. It is a matter of also shrinking the reach of particular accounts, such as to violate sort of censorship generally, those sorts of general standards.
And ultimately what it does is it forces companies to make decisions as to whether or not they're going to change their content.
Oh, absolutely. We do that all the time. We literally, and not only that, but outlets like YouTube will actually attempt to demonetize or restrict your video if you mention that you're doing that. If you say, I can't talk about this issue on YouTube because I'm going to go talk about it over at Daily Wire, they will then demonetize the video for you mentioning that there's another place where they could receive that content.
And have you seen any metric in any of these, how all of this works that says this is, you talk about arbitrary...
capricious,
rules.
Yes.
Yeah, all of those different rules, but is there any evidence whatsoever that this is applied even-handedly at all?
I've seen extraordinarily little evidence that the sort of advertiser standards that GARM spells out have been applied to my friends on the other side of the aisle. And some of them are my friends, but people who oppose me or who oppose my agenda, I think that the proof is in the pudding. There have been zero questions about advertiser pullouts from MSNBC or CNN. Those questions are routinely asked with regard to people on the right side of the aisle. And I will once again ask, for advertisers, please name an outlet on the right side of the aisle that you would deem brand safe.
Well, that's my point. This isn't a particular advertiser choosing not to advertise on a particular show or a particular medium. This is widespread throughout the industry, which is eventually trying to create the content. And it would be easier to deal with this. We talk about misinformation and disinformation and all of that. But we have also been in these hearings where they were censoring.
Legal challenge threatened to expose the inner workings of GARM and its alleged efforts to manipulate the flow of information. The lawsuit promised to be a watershed moment. It had the potential to set a precedent for how far corporations could go in dictating the boundaries of acceptable speech. Musk's legal battle was about more than just advertising dollars. It was about protecting the fundamental right to free expression in the digital age. The congressional hearing and the ensuing legal battles have brought to light a critical issue of our time, the battle for control of the narrative. At stake is the very foundation of a free and democratic society, the ability to access a diverse range of viewpoints and engage in open and honest debate. GARM, with its vast network of advertisers and its influence over global ad spending, stands accused of wielding its power to silence dissenting voices. The organization's actions, if left unchecked, threaten to create an informational echo chamber where only certain viewpoints are deemed acceptable. The fight for media diversity and free speech is far from over. It will require vigilance, courage, and a commitment to upholding the principles that have made America a beacon of liberty for centuries. The outcome of this battle will determine not just the future of our media landscape but the very